People who quit their jobs on the first day, what made you say, I'm done with this? It was a food truck owned by this Russian dude. His cash register was so convoluted. He'd be like, to sell hot dog push burger, then subtract 2 sodas and a small fry. Then he just left me alone. It was overwhelming and I just didn't come back. Story 2. Line job in a factory that assembled magazines. Because of all the paper sliding along the tracks. Little bits would gum up the gears, and they wanted us to reach inside and pull out all the wads of paper scrap about once an hour, while someone manually held down a button that paused the machine from moving. Refused, clocked out for lunch, and left. Story 3. By the way, we never mentioned it at the interview, but you will get 50% pay for 6 months till your trial period is over. I was halfway into my first shift when they sprang that on me. I turned around and walked out. No discussion, didn't say a word, just left. Story 4. When I found out their time clock system didn't track hours worked, but the minutes spent typing or moving your mouse. And it'd take random screenshots too. If you're in a video meeting, I guess they get to take pictures of you too. All that, and they wanted this installed on my personal computer. That and a few other reasons made me back out after one day. Story 5. I was laid off from my first job back when I was in high school due to the housing crisis in the 00s. I was a dishwasher at a restaurant. When new management took over, they offered everyone their old jobs back, and I accepted. I tried to take my CD player that I had left there before the layoff home with me, and I was told that I was stealing as it was company property since it was there when they took over. Everyone in the kitchen attested that it was my CD player, but the new manager wouldn't hear of it, so I just walked out with it. I was called later that night by HR department telling me I was fired for stealing company property. I guess I didn't quit, but I was going to do it anyway. Story 6. I was between jobs and got a temp job helping with payroll, and they told me I would have to hold paychecks for people who did not return their uniform. And when I pointed out this was illegal and showed them the law, they said to do it anyway. So I quit and went back on unemployment until I found a real job 3 weeks later. Quitting a job because they want you to break the law gets you unemployment in most states. Story 7. It was a telemarketing company selling timeshares around the US. My first call was an old lady who told me the story of how her husband fell down the stairs 2 weeks ago and passed away right in front of her. My manager was over my shoulder listening in and said something like, "Okay, now pitch the package." I left immediately. Story 8. In high school, a friend of mine talked up this warehouse job he had for an online surplus store. They gave him a bunch of free electronics and sports equipment. As a high school student, that seemed pretty cool, so I decided to try working there for the summer. Now I realize that was a red flag. On my first day, they asked me to package a commercial range hood that had to be shipped to Alaska. They had no packing material or boxes and refused to buy any. I created a box by piecing together scraps of cardboard and covered them in a ton of tape. Then I filled the box with crumpled printer paper from the office. The manager saw me doing this and proceeded to yell at me for 10 minutes because I wasted their printer paper. I laughed at him and walked out of there. Of course, my friend later told me the range hood was destroyed in shipping, and the manager was livid. A year later, the business was busted for selling stolen global positioning system units. Story 9. It was supposed to be a B2B sales job. First day, I get paired with a highly successful veteran salesman, and we go downtown. Next thing I know, we're walking into a Jiffy Lube waiting area, and the guy I'm with busts out a box of makeup samples and starts trying to sell makeup to the people waiting for their oil to get changed. We leave, and I'm like, what the heck? I thought this was B2B sales. He's like, well, I do go from business to business doing sales. I'm like, that's door to door, not business to business. I asked to be brought back to my car and never called those fools back. Story 10. I got a summer job as an office assistant while in college. They told me on my first day that they had to fire some people later in the week, and they needed me to do it because they didn't want to. I didn't come back the next day. Not only did I, of course, not want to do it, but I was shocked at the callous disrespect they had for the employees that they wanted to fire. If you want to destroy someone's livelihood, have the balls to damn do it yourself. Story 11. I got a job. 1. The first day they told me tomorrow I needed to show up to a different office in San Francisco, which is a 90-minute commute there and a 2-3 hour commute home. Not what I signed up for. They legit could not understand why I was leaving. Story 12. I was a cold caller trying to solicit donations for an organization. Called a guy. His widow answered the phone saying he had recently passed. Supervisor said I should try and get the widow to make a donation. I was done. Story 13. I remember starting a job at a call center for a particular company that has such a bad reputation. They need to change their name every so often. They were telling us how we have 7 minutes allotted for personal time like bathroom breaks. There was one bathroom in the building, way down at the other end of the building. So on our first 15-minute break, I walked to it, took 4.5 minutes to get there. So when we came back from break, I asked, so what happens if you go over the allotted time? And the trainer goes, Well, then the minutes are tracked and deducted from your pay. I got up and walked towards the door, and the guy goes, "See, that's an example of complete unprofessionalism, and that's okay. This type of job isn't for quitters." I spun around and went, "I can handle the job. What I won't do is degrade myself by working for a place that monitors how long it takes you to crap." Story 14. I took a job as a residential maintenance tech for a 500-unit apartment complex. The company that owned the complex owned about 2,000 units all over the city. I've been doing maintenance for 10 years at this point, and I know my crap. Anyway, they send me out with this addict-looking dude to train me. We do a few work orders, and I watch him ghetto rig stuff instead of actually fixing it. I kept my mouth shut until he decided to duct tape a clearly busted sewer stack. I was like, "Bro, I saw Fernco's is the shop. Let's just get a Fernco." He literally tore into me about him having seniority. And he won't be told what to do by some guy who just started. Whatever. I bit my tongue because I had bills to pay. The next work order after that, we go into this woman's apartment while she was at work to fix her sink. He tells me the tenant is really hot and goes into her laundry basket and pulls out a pair of panties to sniff. That was it for me. I walked out, went to the leasing office, explained what my last 4 hours were like, and I would be contacting the authorities and the news about what I witnessed. They offered me $3,000 to keep my mouth shut. Unfortunately, I needed the money, so I took it. Story 15. I was assigned to a middle school grade 6 as a student teacher. I was supposed to be under the guidance of the classroom teacher. She was all too willing to let me be in complete charge and told me I could just do whatever. I called my faculty advisor and requested to be reassigned. The next day, I was at a different school with a teacher who knew what she was doing. Story 16. Not quite the first day, I have a mortgage, but been through the entire interview process. Small pay rise plus quite a generous company pension, all confirmed in writing. Cool, thinks I. Leave my existing job and start at the new place. A week or two in, HR department does their induction. And the generous company pension doesn't exist. It's statutory minimum. Obviously, I raise this because that's not what I signed up for. The answer comes back. Tough, that's the pension. Excuse me, but we agreed in writing that it wasn't. Don't care, that's the pension. They were astonished when I put in my resignation about a month later. Story 17. Got hired as a farmhand for a potato farmer as a summer job from college. Minimum wage through the local job office where I was told, "This guy has gone through a lot of workers." First thing he told me to do was change the oil in the tractor and pointed to where things were. Now I had changed the oil in my car, but that hardly compared. I managed next. I was given a jack and told to walk out to the field where a 40 tire on one of those huge sprinkler systems had slipped off the railroad tie going over the ditch, and use the jack to get it lifted out of the ditch and somehow use my 130 pounds frame to move it back onto the railroad tie. I managed. Lunchtime came and I had trudged back from the field with the jack. The farmer sees me and says, "I'm going to the house for lunch. Please eat in your car." Luckily, I had brought my own lunch, but it was 90 degrees out, and I was a sweaty, filthy mess from what I had done so far, and had no way to clean up. I managed for the afternoon. The farmer had me perch on the back of the potato planter while he drove it down the field, and I had to hop back and forth between the planter bins and manually make sure the potatoes were dropping into the feeder tubes. I got a call shortly after getting home asking if I'd like an assembly line job in an air-conditioned factory. Never went back to the potato farm. Story 18. Work in it and got a new job as a sysadmin. And on the first day found support tickets where the guy before me was required to track every second of his time through it. Several tickets that read something like cleaned office, 15 minutes. No thanks. I'm not a child that needs supervision. Luckily, my old job let me come back like I never left. Story 19. After 3 interviews, negotiations, and tests, they agreed on my salary, and we started on Monday. I come in, do all the paperwork, and get assigned a PC, desk, etc. Before coming in, I saw the red flag that they had a high turnover, but they agreed on a really good salary for me. All of a sudden, I get an email from General Director that he wants to test me again, and gave me 3 complex tasks from his side business totally unrelated to my skills and position in the company, like asking a doctor to write a code. He told me just do it because you're working for me from now on. I stood up and went through the door. Half an hour later, the HR department calls me and asks to come back. I told her to have a good day and never contact me again. At my new job, I have a colleague who worked there for 1 year. She started telling me crazy stories about the boss and the company. I didn't dodge a bullet, but rather a rocket strike. Story 20. Only time I've ever just walked off a job site. I was homeless and answered a Craigslist ad for a roofing job. I'd never done roofing before. I was working for a pair of tweakers from New York. After spending most of the day doing standard labor, bringing materials up a ladder, putting down roofing material, and stomping down on it after they hit it with a blowtorch, etc. They wanted me to stand on a 2-inch wide beam that was rotten and slick from rain, visibly unstable, with no restraints or safety equipment whatsoever. And they wanted me to stand on it and use a sledgehammer to smash out as much decaying roof as I could. until I hit a point where the roof was solid again. Roof. I told the guy I wasn't cut out for that type of work. He told me to quit being an upstate pussy. I told him to find a downstate penis because someone is going to die under their tutelage, and I'm not going to let it be me. He refused to pay me for the 6 hours of intense physical labor I'd already worked, and I had to panhandle to get bus fare back, but I didn't die. Story 21. I got this job cold calling local businesses to sell them printer toner subscriptions. Weirdest, most awkward job prospect I've ever encountered. Came in at around 4 p.m. Place was an empty room with a desk against one wall, a PC, and a phone. Owner had an office in the back. Owner has me put together his office chair for him. Watch him try to write an email. He can barely write a coherent sentence. Finish the chair. Then instructs me to pull up a program on the PC and call the numbers. Ask them if they want to buy toner subscriptions. Okay. Spend the next 3 hours awkwardly calling places, asking if they want to buy toner. No script, no product descriptions, no printer models. Completely flying by the seat of my pants. Many ask if I will install it for them. I don't know. No one on either side has any idea what's going on. I leave, immediately text that I'm not coming back. Owner texts back that I'm not qualified for the position. Never got paid for the 4 hours. Story 22. I've never quit a job on the first day, but I saw someone who did for physical reasons. This was a man in his mid-50 years old who was hired to be a construction inspector at good old Fort Irwin. He showed up one Monday morning in mid-July, got his briefing, and then went out into the field. Do you know what Fort Irwin is like in mid-July? It was a typical 110 degrees day by noon. The hottest part of the day is around 3 p.m. I saw him come back at noon. He was beet red and drenched in sweat. I heard him tell our supervisor he simply could not take it, so he quit. Story 23. Basic restaurant server job. I was in college. The drive was kind of long, and as a college student, that matters a lot. I was mostly getting a job due to feeling like I was inadequate if I didn't have one. So I go buy the black clothes required and show up. But the clothes weren't black enough due to having a gray lining around the button-up shirt's collar and cuffs on the inside of the shirt. It barely peeked through under certain angles. They told me to leave and come back when the clothes fit their requirements. So I drove back to campus, called them up, and quit on the phone. It was just way too much BS to deal with and did not bode well. Story 24. I was injured, and they told me to keep working. I was loading trucks. Went to the boss and said, "Who do I tell if I want to quit?" He responded, "Me." I said, okay, I quit. He asked me to finish my shift, but I laughed in his face. Story 25. Not me, but a friend. This friend is a very good-looking woman. It was to be her first job out of college, working as a research tech in the lab of a Nobel Prize winner. She thought it was weird that at her interview he told her she needed to wear a skirt to work since he wanted people to look professional. But in a lab? Since he was older from a more formal time, she thought, oh, well, okay. At the first lab meeting, he sits next to her at the table while one of the students, postdocs, is making a presentation. As soon as the lights went down, she feels a hand on her thigh, and it's the Nobel laureate, and he is working his hand up her thigh. She squirms, but doesn't do anything and quit that day. I asked her why she didn't go to HR department, and she said she didn't think it would matter since he was Mr. Big Shot. Later turns out she's heard stories about him from multiple female employees. He died before he could get me too. Story 26. I was a car salesman half a day. Family of 5 come in and settle on a Pontiac Catalina. Sales manager told me to squeeze another $275 from them. I went to family, cut $500 from the contract, turned it in and sent them home in a new ride, told sales manager I was done and left. Story 27. I came in to be one of 4 retail managers for a museum with 4 stores. While training me, I overheard multiple associates, who I would be managing, swearing and yelling at customers. Then one of the other managers training me to log the safe yelled and screamed at me that I didn't know how to count because the safe was $1 short. We later found the dollar on the floor behind the desk she had been counting at. Then the district manager above me spent the entire day sitting at the cameras listing reasons to write up associates, which included seeing the outline of a girl's phone through her back pocket even though she never took it out, an associate going to the bathroom twice during his shift. They were only permitted 1 break apparently, and an associate not asking literal children to donate to the museum. Great first day. Even better last day. Story 28. I applied to a local newspaper for advertising sales, thinking I would be making a lot of cold calls. Instead, I was being trained on ways to sneak past things like front desk reception so that I could knock directly on a business owner's office door. This was in a small town where I knew a lot of the local business owners already, and the thought of behaving that way around people I had known my whole life was just distasteful. That and learning there was no wage, just commission. I did that first day of training, and then at the end of the day gave them back all the training materials and apologized for wasting their time, but that I couldn't see myself doing very well at that job. Story 29. I was in high school, working 3 part-time jobs. I'd gotten hired as a cashier at a supermarket. I really just wanted to be a stock boy, but oh well. I show up to work and the manager isn't there. So I just start asking people like, hey, I'm new. How do I clock in? What do I do? Eventually, someone clocks me in like an hour late. They put me on a register, show me the produce code sheet like once, then left me alone. No clue how to do a sale, no idea how to do coupons, etc. The manager shows up halfway through and yells at me in front of a customer for not knowing produce codes. Even the customer was like, "Hey, it's his first day. Calm down. Time for my lunch break." Nobody has shown me where the staff room is, so I just buy lunch from the store and eat it in the cafe area. Manager storms in, takes my tray, throws the rest of my food away, and goes off that I cannot eat where customers are, that I'm stupid, etc. I just got up, threw the apron at her, and walked out. Absolutely ridiculous. I did, however, go back and demand my check for hours worked. Because damn that. Story 30. Started a sales job just after graduating, which I was happy to do because I'd done what I thought was a similar job while studying. Morning was as expected, induction stuff, a few odd characters. Manager seemed okay. After lunch, they said, "Okay, now we need to get in a car and go do some door-to-door sales." This was supposed to be an office based on the phone type of job, so I was already thinking, nope. After about 45 minutes of chatter and slight panic because the person who usually took people around had gone off somewhere, someone asked if a car with a specific reg plate belonged to anyone. It was my car. Manager asked me to drive the team to an area of town for the door-to-door. They said they'd give me a separate payment for fuel. I said my insurance wouldn't cover them, so I can't take the risk. They said to call my insurance and confirm. I said I'd go outside to do that while having a cigarette. I did not smoke. I got in my car and went home. Story 31. Not sure if it fully counts as first day. I did a week of orientation with a manager who held me captive in her car for 12 hours days and legit wouldn't let me go home around 4 or 5 p.m. as I was told would be my end time. We were doing in-home photo sessions for babies from like 7-8 a.m. and I didn't get returned to my car until around 8-9 p.m. I was getting a ton of red flags on how pay was besides the crazy hours. They promised to set pay, but then came to find out it was based on how many sessions I actually completed each day, not how many hours I was there, and they wanted you to be a used car salesman trying to convince parents to buy a multi-year baby photo plan package to actually get a decent paycheck. Nope. Some of the houses were just plain skanky, and I was forced to breathe a cloud of cigarette smoke for over an hour and roaches in the bathroom. The next day after that skanky house, my first official day on my own, they went from assigning me to an area near my house as I was told would be where I worked, to instead be in an area that was about half an hour away and far from safe to walk around by myself. I used to play pool with my mom near that area, and she would have big guys walk me to and from my car, so I knew firsthand about the safety of the area. Especially with photo equipment. It's like they wanted me to get mugged my first week. I was like, nope, I'm out. The manager had me take home the equipment in my car, maybe to keep me from just not showing up. Then I was to meet her in the morning, over half an hour away to go in her car again before I would be sent on my own to the unsafe area. I helped her transfer all the equipment into her car from my trunk, then handed her my training paperwork as I said I quit, so they couldn't go after me for theft or something, and walked back to my car. Crazy lady was staring in my car window from a foot away as I drove off. Story 32. I applied at this massive nightclub, event space, conference center as a busser. I thought I would be grabbing drinks, etc. When I arrived for my first day, they got what had to be 1,000 chairs stacked in this massive warehouse room, and they asked me to carry them one by one. You could do 2 or 3 at a time, but it was quite heavy, outside and into a different space. Across the street, keep in mind it was winter and freezing outside, and I was dressed to be indoors for the day. Anyway, I carried about 200, which took hours before saying whatever. I was freezing and tired, and this was going to take more than the 8-hour shift and the same thing next day. I didn't even tell anyone I was leaving. I just dropped off the chair and went home. I didn't ask for my pay for the 2 or 3 hours, and they never messaged me about it. I was so happy to get home. The position was advertised as event bussing, which I get can include cleaning and setup, but this was just manual labor. I wore a really nice black-collared shirt, dress pants, a belt, and my only pair of leather dress shoes, BTW. They told me to dress this way, did my hair, etc., as it was advertised to be fancy events. I was not dressed to move chairs for 8 hours in the cold. Story 33? It wasn't a job. It was a scam. I responded to a help-wanted ad for marketing and advertising, which I had some background in. I showed up in a suit and tie to a small bare-bones office in a business park. I was by far the best-dressed person out of the 20 or so people doing the group interview. The manager explained that the job would be to stand outside the entry of a grocery store and collect donations for Toys for Tots, which isn't really marketing or advertising. Amazingly, almost everyone got the job, which made me incredibly suspicious. But I figured I was already there, give it a shot to see what the deal was. It's not like I had anywhere else to be. People could donate cash, but they were strongly encouraged to buy some of the overpriced, crappy toys we conveniently had at our table, and then donate them into the big box next to us. The manager had shown off the plastic bins of toys during the interview, and we brought 2 of them with us to the store to set out for people to buy. A few savvy people asked about the nonprofit status of the organization, and for tax information they could use to write off the donation. The manager seemed to have no clue what they were talking about. At the end of the afternoon, we went back to the office where I saw them dump the donated toys out of the box and pack them back into the plastic bins so they could go out again to be sold during the evening shift. The manager then explained that I wasn't going to get an hourly rate, but I would get a commission for every toy I sold, and the salary they advertised was what I could expect to earn once I had a few salespeople working under me, giving me a portion of their commission. The manager I'd spent the day with explained that she'd started a few months earlier and was on her way to making great money. I got out of there. A few weeks later, I saw on the news that they got busted by the cops. Story 34. 2 hours into my first shift at a glassware shop, I'd broken 175 pounds worth of stuff by accident, while dusting the shelves, while wrapping items that a customer had just bought, and some things I swear broke just because I existed too closely to them. The owner, who was the artist, glassblower, to his infinite credit, didn't want to charge me or take it out of my pay. He actually said I did a great job with the customers and wanted me to stay, but my nerves couldn't take it, so I walked out, carefully. Story 35. Being tasked with opening mail, and after opening the mail, being asked whether I had been taught how to check for letter bombs, for minimum wage. Story 36. I got an offer with one of the largest United Kingdom banks. Heard nothing for 3 months. Then they texted me on the starting day, expecting me in the office at 8 a.m. I'd chased them multiple times over the 3 months. Technically quit on the starting day, but never really started. Story 37. Not the first day, but I quit teaching less than a month into it. The list why is pretty big, taking away all my planning time and then constantly criticizing me by telling me my lessons seemed improvised. No crap. The district as a whole being completely unorganized. The required professional development. Days were such a mess, they were just salt in an open wound. Not taking an extremely severe daily behavioral situation in my class seriously, even when me and the other third-grade teachers were all begging administration to help every day. The principal basically sabotaging my progress with one of the students from the previous point just because. The district deciding to move me and the last 7 hired teachers to different schools due to enrollment changes, telling me about it on Tuesday morning, expecting me to teach until Friday, and then be ready at the new school Monday morning with no time to prep. I quit on the spot and walked out at the end of the next day. Story 38. Had a job as one of those people holding a sign on a street for a closeout sale. I sat down to tie my shoe and got yelled at because I'm not supposed to be just sitting there. I mean, she literally yelled at me. So I left the sign there and went home. Story 39. I started the day at 7 a.m. at a little technical workshop where we repaired electronics. At 8 a.m., I had learned that all 3 coworkers were there for 1 month max, and the team lead resigned yesterday, and I was to follow her up. At around 9 a.m., the wife of the big boss waltzes in, verbally assaults the coworker next to me and tells him if she ever sees him with headphones in again, she fires him on the spot. She doesn't even greet me. I let it sink in. 11 a.m., I decide to explore the facility on my own since no one is showing me around. I learn there is no break room, only a shoddy toilet outside. You're supposed to eat your lunch in your car, outside. And to my absolute horror, that there is no coffee machine on premise, and people who brought one saw them destroyed. At 12 a.m., I walk into the boss's office. I say I have never seen such a crafty workplace, and he just has to pay me from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., and I'm out. Fought for a month with him, and had to send a lawyer to get what I was owed because he wouldn't pay me unless I finished my workday, which I wouldn't have been able to in those conditions. Funny story is, since that day, my first question in any job interview was, do you guys have a coffee machine? It's my, do they care about their people kind of thing. If the answer is no, I walk. I did it twice to flabbergasted recruiters. Story 40. It was time for me to clock out. They knew I asked for the hours I got because my then kindergartner gets off the bus at that time, and if no parent is present at the bus stop, they take the child back to school. If you miss picking them up from the stop enough times, they contact CPS. I was already going through a divorce and was on probation, so I really didn't want any reason beyond what is necessary for me to contact my PO. You have to check in with the GM before you leave, so I did that. She told me I can't leave yet because my relief had not shown up yet. I told her I can't stay. I have to pick up my kid from the bus stop. She told me, looking dead at my eyes, well, I don't care about that. And I snapped back without skipping a beat. Neither does my PO and CPS. I'm leaving now. And the staff that heard me tell her that were in absolute shock. I even spoke back like that. I walked out the door to never return. You want me to jeopardize my freedom? Custody of my children? The safety of my children? You want me to jeopardize all things precious to me at $7.14 an hour because some idiot is late for work? Story 41. Interviewed for a position, and they outlined everything I would be doing. Got there the first day and discovered that I would be doing none of it. Fortune 50 company no less. Story 42. Technically second day. Started working at a car dealership as a lot porter. Me and other brand new coworker were ordered, to straighten a line of cars during what was the worst thunderstorm that year. Turned out multiple tornadoes and tons of lightning. Boss said if we didn't do it right then to not worry about coming back, so we both quit on the spot. Still waited out the storm though. Story 43. I told a guy who was into me that I was thinking of applying for a fun little cafe job, so he asked for my resume and applied to Starbucks for me. I surprisingly got the job after a half-assed webcam interview. The manager who hired me told me to come in at 5 a.m. for my first day, and when I showed up, the hiring manager wasn't there, and the two workers who were had no idea I was coming or who I was. I thought that's weird, but whatever. They trained me on filling the ice and explained what some appliances did, prepare for burn scars from the oven. But when rush hour started, I was thrown onto the register with no knowledge of what the heck I was doing. I didn't even know the size names, and they got me in the front taking orders on a computer system I never used before. I had to keep asking the workers next to me what meant what, and they seemed annoyed because they were busy handling the drive-thru. I kept apologizing to the customers saying it was my first day, and a customer looked me in the eyes while putting $1 in the tip jar and said, "Remember, humility gets you everywhere." And I just smiled and nodded. After my shift from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., the hiring manager who finally showed up said I am to come in at that same time for the rest of the month. I said, let's just pretend this never happened. And I never went back, didn't even get paid for that day. But it was a novel experience, so I don't even care. And story 44. Got hired to be a machinist, which I had years of experience. Show up first day and did usual paperwork stuff, then expected to be sent to shop and run has machines. Instead, they said, well, we're fully staffed in machine shop and we're transferring you to fiberglass department, which I had no experience. Walked into shop and it was a total nightmare with no personal protective equipment devices and told you'll be fine. Stood around till lunch, then just left. Idiots called me every day for a week wondering where I was. That job has now been posted on Indeed for 3 straight years. Story 45. Got a job tarring roofs in the summer in Maryland. Sweating my ass off, but I could barely keep up. One big dude was teaching me the proper way to spread the tar evenly with a giant mop. He kept prompting me as I was going, then suddenly stopped talking. I look over and his eyes have rolled back and is starting to fall over into the hot tar we just spread. I grabbed him and started screaming for the other guys as he was too big, and we were both heading for the tar. They grabbed both of us and got us off the roof. Paramedics for him and the water hose for me. When lunchtime rolled around, I told the boss, I'm go out. He asked if I was coming back tomorrow, and I said, damn no, and left. I lasted about 4 hours. Story 46. When I spilled and broke every plate I touched and had my ass grabbed 5 times in 4 hours. I went home and had a job offer somewhere else. I respect all waitresses out there. Story 47. I interviewed and was hired for a quality assurance position at a fiberglass molding company. Sounded awesome and the pay was pretty good for the area. I needed a job and it all seemed to work out. First night, working the night shift, I show up ready to go. The guy I am working with shows me the ropes, and I am confused. He is showing me how to actually make the fiberglass molds, then take them out of the ovens. So I asked him, wait, I thought I was doing quality control. Oh, right. The quality control you do is after you make the mold. Welp, strike one. So, I figure, I need the job. Tough it out. About 3 hours into my shift and my hands are sore because the molds are hot as balls when you pull them out. So the same guy comes by at the 3-hour mark and is like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, we have gloves to protect your hands. What the heck? You didn't think to mention that 3 hours ago? Strike two. About 30 minutes later, I ask where the bathroom is because I have to piss. Oh no, you can't go to the bathroom. What did you just say to me? You can only use the bathroom on your lunch break in another hour. Damn no! I am a grown-ass man and you are not going to tell me when I can take a piss. Strike three. I handed him the gloves and walked out right there. Damn that nonsense. Story 48. I applied for a cashier job at a PetSmart. My expertise was in aquatics, but they didn't have a spot open. The manager who met me at the door apparently decided I was to be a dog groomer instead. They walked me into a room that had to be 104 degrees with 100% humidity. It was raining inside the room and there was nothing but dog hair in the air, like it was some thick air soup of the damned. I'm mildly allergic to both cats and dogs, but as long as it's not directly in my face, I can usually manage. I was in fact not managing. The manager pointed out various stations I didn't understand, said something about how I should get over any issue being bit because it happens several times a week. I couldn't hear a thing hardly with the blow dryer going at full blast. Then the manager walked out. I waited a minute trying to see what the hell I've somehow missed to land myself here, then went out to try to talk to her. She was at a register and was irritated when I said there seems to be a misunderstanding. She told me to go get a uniform from the back, a back I have never seen and don't know where it is, and to hurry up and start. I walked out the door and went home. They never called me to ask where I went. Story 49. Responded to an ad for a warehouse manager position back in 2001 when we were in a recession, so I was eager to take something. The interview went well enough, but description of duties was vague. Had to start next morning. I show up, and there's a couple of dozen guys all ready to head out and get going. I don't remember why now, but I felt at the time like I was getting caught up in some illegal operation. I get in a car with two other guys, and I'm getting worried. We drive to a town 40 minutes away. I then find out what the job is. These were door-to-door salesmen, except they were going into businesses and trying to sell crap to employees. Since I was far away from home without my car, I had to help them sell. We spent like 10 hours going into convenience stores, gas stations, etc., peddling junk. We were the reason no solicitation signs exist at businesses. One of the most miserable days of my life, and I was paid $0. Story 50? I was hired in a temp agency office as a receptionist. When I was interviewed, I was told I would be answering the phone, relaying messages, and greeting clients as they walked in, as well as some light organizing and mail dispersing, etc. I was going to fill the position of the current receptionist as she was moving up in the company. After I clocked in for my first day, I was then told how to give, handle, run the urine substances tests for clients. I don't do well at all with bodily fluids of any kind. I just can't do it. Would have never even applied for the position had I known. And then by noon, I was scolded by the boss for not knowing how to look up resumes in their database by keywords to source for possible employees for temp positions. I was never told or taught anything about any of it. I took my lunch break in my car, cried for about 2 minutes, and then left. They called me and left me a voicemail apologizing for the way I was spoken to and for not training me and throwing me into it. Story 51. I've done this twice. When I was a teenager, I got a job at KFC. The first day, someone dropped a tray of raw biscuits on the dirty-ass floor, and the manager told him to pick them up, clean them off, and put them in the oven. I clocked out and never went back. The second time, I started at a pizza place as a deliverer and someone ordered a pizza. They all gathered around and laughed at the order. Then they started doing disgusting things with the dough, putting boogers on it, sticking their hands down their pants and touching the dough, sneezing on it, and whatever else nasty things I didn't see. Turns out the guy who ordered it is a cop who arrested one of them for something, and they were taking revenge on him. I was expected to deliver this pizza. I put it in my car, drove to the nearest dumpster, and threw it away. Then I drove home and called the customer and told him what happened and where the pizza is now, and that he should never order from them again. I don't take that stuff lightly. I pretend that all food is something I will eat, and I would never give anything to a customer that I wouldn't eat. What if he ordered it for his kids? That's disgusting. Story 52. Not my first day, but I quit after a few days. I was hired at Applebee's as a to-go specialist. My job duties consisted of taking online phone orders, having them bagged up and ready for when the customer arrived, then taking it out to their car. Simple, right? Well, I wasn't properly trained on how to operate the computer to place orders. So when customers called, I would mess up their orders or not know how to place them. I brought it up to my manager, and he said that I should have played with the computer more when we weren't busy. He would also yell at me during rush hour because I would get overwhelmed by all the orders and put them in the wrong bag or give them too many napkins. I also had another manager who wouldn't let me clock out on time because he was too busy flirting with the much younger waitresses. He even told me, "Help them bus tables and you can go." That was not in my job description, and I had already stayed 3 hours overtime. The nail in the coffin, though, was them telling me I got a write-up for screwing up too many orders. I walked out and never looked back after that. Story 53. It was a hotel. Not a crappy one, but not a fancy one either. I was hired as housekeeping. I love cleaning, and it paid decent, so I was excited. First room had a pile of toenails on the bedside table. Gross, but whatever, I've got gloves. Second room, someone pissed on the phone. I asked where the replacements were, and my trainer told me to just wipe it. It was a landline. There was piss inside of it. What the heck? Third room had come in the windowsill. Another UTF. I noticed the window faced a playground across the street. I quit right there. Story 54. Airy supplier for one day. I was a driver's helper. Me and one other kid rode on a delivery truck, and when we made a stop, the driver would tell us what to move into the store. I'm guessing it was a union thing? Like the drivers were just drivers, and me and the other kid were the hands. The work was whatever, but the way it worked was this: there is no schedule. Every day you call the boss, and he tells you if you're working or not. If you missed a call, you were fired. There were multiple shifts. So at 6 a.m. when you called, they could tell you be there in an hour, or you were working second shift, so come in at noon. You could work every day, both shifts that day, or not work for many days. You never knew. So not only did you not know what your income was going to be, you couldn't reasonably have a second job. On Friday, you could be randomly selected to do an overnight, where you would ride with the driver over a longer distance and stay in a hotel with him. Yes, in the same room. If you refused the overnight run, you were fired. The money wasn't even that great. Story 55. Was hired for a sales desk position. That was what the interview was for. An indoor desk position with an assigned client list. I was even shown the desk I'd be sitting at. But once I accepted the position, I was assigned an outside sales rep to train me. That training involved me, a then 19-year-old woman, riding in a stranger's car, 40-ish man, for 2 hours to trawl the streets of San Antonio to knock on doors. When I tried to explain to the rep that this wasn't what I was hired to do, he said it's exactly what I was hired to do. He was getting the desk position while I would be taking over his outside sales job, that I had to earn the desk. I spent 12 hours down there until he was satisfied with his numbers. I sat in his car most of the time because it was cold. Once we got back, I went home and never went back. They called several times. But seriously? Did they really expect me to come back? Story 56. I got employed by a fast food place and went in for orientation and training for 1 day. After it was done, the manager said to me, "I'll call you to tell you when you can come into work." She never called. After 4 days of waiting, I finally called her and asked, why didn't she call me? She said, "Oh, I shouldn't have told you that. We were wondering where you were. You can come in tomorrow." No thanks. Story 57. Walked into a new office job on a Monday morning, and the first thing I saw was a group of people consoling a woman who was sitting on a chair, sobbing. She looked up, right at me, and asked who I was. Obviously a random stranger among a bunch of people who knew each other well. I nervously introduced myself. Still sobbing, she asked why I was there. I said it was my first day as job title. Yeah, she'd just gotten fired and I was there as her replacement. She got even more hysterical, and it felt like I was about to get attacked by an angry mob. The owner of the company had hired me, and when I'd asked during the interview process why the position was open, he'd said it was a new role. It wasn't. I turned around, walked out the door, got in my car, and called the director as I drove off. Story 58. Answered an ad to do electronic sales in North Jersey in the early 90s. Get there and they send you out in a white van loaded with boxes of speakers and a fake invoice. You were supposed to approach people and be like, "Oh man, someone at the warehouse messed up and we have too many speakers. This invoice shows you what they usually go for. I'll sell them for less if you have cash." We didn't sell crap. We almost got arrested at the mall when a guy was like, "Sure, let me run back in and find an ATM," but called the cops. And when we got back with the van, the owners, obviously low-level mafia guys back when that meant something, think Sopranos, were blasting music, smoking joints, and dancing around the warehouse, pointing at the shredded money they'd scattered on the floor, saying, "See this? This is how much money we make around here." I didn't go back to see if I could sell my first pair of speakers. Story 59. The boss hid the bathroom key and had everyone ask him for permission to use it. I got the runs the first day, of course. When I asked for the key the second time after 30 minutes of using it the first time, he asked me, "Again?" The third time, he started chewing me out. I literally turned around on my heel and got to the locker room to take my stuff and go. He then tried to block my way out when I sat on my motorcycle to drive away. Story 60. When I was 21 years old, I got hired on the spot at a village inn. I didn't know enough at that time to know that's a huge red flag. When I showed up for my first shift, I was shocked and appalled at how disgusting the kitchen was. When I watched a server drop somebody's pancakes on the kitchen floor, pick them up and put them back on the plate, then walk out and serve them to someone, I was done. Story 61. Going back many years, I was newly married and desperate for job. Times were tough. There were these ads in the newspaper: rock and roll, make $2,000 a week, with no description of the job itself. I had nothing else going, so I called. They said, "You sound perfect. Come on in for an interview." They wouldn't give details about the job, all would be explained. I go in, meet the boss, no interview. He just said, "Joe will take you out and show you the ropes." I go with Joe and we drive way the duck out in the burbs. I had no idea where we were. Finally, we get Dot to an office building. He opens the trunk of his car and it filled with fake leather purses and briefcases. This was door to door, or should I say office-to-office salesperson. I walked around with the guy for a couple of hours, didn't make a single sale, and he was their best. I am not a salesperson. I left at noon. Luckily, I jumped on the right bus. I had no idea where I was. Still took me 2 hours to get home. Story 62. I worked for a gang master being sent to different factories for temp gigs. Turned up to one place, had to sign a sheet to be given a knife and a penny, then spent 3 hours scraping carrots that were frozen from being pulled out the ground still. I was covered in muck and my fingers were frozen and I caught them with the knife. Got shouted at for being so clumsy. Damn that noise. I got sent to first aid, got a plaster, and just left. Story 63. Wasn't the first day, but I made it 3 days in and dipped. It was the most absolutely toxic, hated, depressing, negative, hostile place I've ever been. Didn't see any of that in the interview, but when they took me around after being hired, everyone came out of the woodwork to tell me how crappy it was, and all the personal beefs between people in the other departments. Seniority was super demeaning, and crap-talked floor employees openly. I was treated like a hostile thief on day 1. And when I got to walk around on my own, I asked people how long they'd worked for the company and how they liked it. They absolutely unloaded. On top of that, in the interview, they said, "We have all the tools you'll ever need here. You don't have to buy any." Well, that wasn't true. Day 2, they said, "You'll have to buy everything yourself, and you're not allowed to take them out of the building even if you quit." When they told me work on live 440 volt, I'm not a licensed electrician, I said, "Nope," went back to my old job. Story 64. I went through 3 interviews to get the job. I arrived 10 minutes early on my first day. The manager of the location I was told to report to had no idea that I had been hired. They called the person that instructed me where and when to report. That person said they needed to check their notes and call back. I didn't wait. I just excused myself and thanked the manager for his time. Later in the afternoon, the person who hired me called and was angry that I was a no-show at the very place I showed up for. Story 65. It started with the guy saying, "I told him he should have just hired you when you dropped off your resume." First red flag. Then at coffee break and lunch, all everyone did was get and complain. I finished the day, but it was such an angry place with high turnover, it didn't seem worth it to continue. Story 66. Worked in an Amazon warehouse. I just finished grad school and was applying for jobs. This was March 2020. The place was unbelievably hot, especially while wearing a mask. The guy training us kept screaming at us, "Come on, let's get this money, let's go, yeah!" Crap like that. It was a 12-hour shift of back-breaking walk. By the end, I thought I was going to die. I left that day, went home, went to sleep, got up at 5 a.m. and redoubled my efforts to find a job. Got a job 1 month later working from home. Story 67. I started a job in an office, normal cubicles, offices, and reception. I went to the washroom and it was locked. I asked someone if there was another washroom. They said ask reception for the key. Really? I went to reception and felt really humiliated, but I asked for the key. She handed it to me and asked if I needed toilet paper. I said it's all right. False alarm, got my stuff and left. Story 68. Fast food restaurant. They showed me how to work the grill once. Burned myself more than a couple times opening and closing it. Berated me for being slow when I was trying to keep up and keep everything clean when I didn't know what I was doing. I also stressed to them I had to be out at exactly 2 o'clock because my ex-husband had to go to work and couldn't leave my young kids home alone for even a few minutes. I asked at 1 o'clock if I needed to do any tasks before I left. Wasn't my first food job, so I knew to ask. They said they'd tell me soon. I asked again at 30 minutes. Still told just to wait. 5 minutes before I'm supposed to leave, the new shift comes in and they tried to get me to start on the list, which was a poster on the wall. Not a quick task by any means. I said, "Nope, told you I cannot stay even a few minutes past 2 o'clock. Best of luck to you, but I'm out." Story 69. I thought I was at a second interview. Interviewer thought he had hired me. At lunch, I mentioned this was a peculiar interview. I was driving a huge tractor moments before putting out chemicals, and he said I was at my first day of work. I asked what pay he thinks we agreed upon, and he said the pay we negotiated was good, but I had to work the first 6 months at a third of that as a probation period, and then we'd talk about the permanent pay. I told him that was crazy and got up and left. It is a legit company, but a small family-run agriculture operation, and I was going to be the first non-family member in management, and he just didn't have any idea how to hire people. 15 years later, and I still won't buy their products when I see them at the grocery store. Story 70. Bar on the beach. Helping the bartender set up the bar before open and learning the lay of the land. Manager walked by and said, "No sunglasses while on the clock," and he was wearing sunglasses. I thought it was a joke because the bartender laughed, so I didn't take mine off. Music on. Just before we opened the doors, the manager came back around and told me no sunglasses on the clock. I explained that I thought he was joking because he had sunglasses, but I took them off before guests arrived. He asked me to join him in the office, proceeded to rip a line of blow off the desk and tell me he's never clocked in, he's salary, and I have to listen to him. Glasses on, walked out. Story 71. Interviewed for a position as a shift lead. Told, it's probably going to be a no, but we are also hiring cashiers. I waited for the offer. If it was cashier, I was going to say no. I was already a trainer where I was working and making over minimum wage. I get the offer, it's for shift lead. I go to the owner to double check that this is correct. Yes, I'm told it's legit. Awesome. I'm told shift lead training will start right after the first of the year as it's a new location and we're all new hires. I put in my 2 weeks at my old place. I call about training. It's not time for you to do training yet. I take some temp work. Finally, I get the green light to come in and get training. I arrive for what turns out to be my cashier training. I worked the whole shift because I needed the money, but I turned in my uniform and quit. Story 72. I got a job at a gas station. It was one of those where customers come to the window but can't come inside. Bulletproof glass, the whole works. I felt safe working there. So things were going well and I was catching on quickly. I had been there for about 2 hours and I had asked about being paid for training. I cannot remember exactly how it was brought up, but once I asked, the manager tells me, "Oh, Mr. Johnson doesn't pay for training." He believes he's teaching you a life skill. Now, I'm not labor law expert, but I'm pretty sure training is supposed to be paid in the United States. I immediately packed up my stuff and headed for the door. The manager asked where I was going, and I said Mr. Johnson is an idiot and that I don't work for free. Don't. Story 73. My manager using the training time to have the crew detail his car. Him nodding off after lunch and asking what pills everyone has, then getting mad when nobody had anything they wanted to give him for free. Story 74. The owner's daughter showed up to open 1.5 hours late, said she thought her mom had given me keys. Proceeded to tell me to unload her car before I could come in and clock in. I locked her keys in her car and left. Story 75. My brother was buddies in high school with a guy our age who just inserts of ads into the weekend newspaper. It was piecemeal work, and you got paid by the piece. I went once with my brother, and we worked for like 6 hours, sorting and stuffing like 13 or 17 different ads together into the papers. Somehow it worked out to like $1.17 an hour or something ridiculously low like that. I never went back. My brother's friend was all disappointed and like, "You're just going to leave me hanging here?" I'm like, "Yeah. For $1.17 per hour, I sure I am." Story 76. Got laid off December 2019. Great timing, right? Anyway, job hunting during COVID was bad. So one job I quit during orientation, actually. Onboarding was a group of 15 or so new hires. Red flag right there. The HR department people were very rude and condescending during the presentation and made a point of saying, "If you fall asleep during this presentation, you are instantly fired." I decided I didn't want to work for a group that treated people openly like that. Later that year, got hired at a cardboard factory. First day, I saw that the massive raw material rolls were stacked way too high for my comfort. I told them to forget I ever applied. Dodged a bullet there. 2020 was a rough year. Landed a good job, the beginning of 2021, still there. Story 77. First year in college, I took a job cleaning table. Was told the dress code requirement, which included black pants and black shoes. I showed up in black Nikes, all black with a white swoosh on the side. The manager told me my shoes needed to be all black and made me go to the shoe store next door to buy some all black ones. Purchased the cheapest ones I could find, and once back at the restaurant, proceeded to slip and slide all over the floor because they had no grip. Later, the manager called the employees to the kitchen to do some weird kickoff for the evening shift, where they stood around and did a team huddle. I joined in, and the manager said, "Sorry, this is for waiters only," and asked me to step out of the huddle. I left the huddle and walked out the door at the start of my shift, never returning. Story 78. I worked for a publishing startup in 1992. Our job was to put folded magazines in screen doors across West Omaha. I had a driver's license, so I got to drive the van for the runners and drop off bins at intersections for the runners to restock. The vehicle was a van in the academic sense in that it had 4 wheels and an engine, but brakes and tires were clearly an afterthought. I decided not dying was important, so I lost those people's phone number and worked at Wendy's for a while. Story 79. Summer job in Australia, in a hospital kitchen between finishing school and starting university. I was unloading the huge industrial dishwashing machine they had, 40 degrees in day, dressed in heavy cotton work clothes, apron and elbow-length rubber gloves, and just enveloped in clouds of steam. No aircon or fans running in the place. Got to the post-lunch peak, and the other people working there decided they could take their break and let the new guy handle the entire thing. Hit pause on the machine, went to the locker room, changed out of the work uniform, dumped it in a dirty linen bin. Uniform was provided by the hospital, I didn't have to buy it, and walked out. Didn't tell anyone. Early 1990s, so no mobile or answering machine at the time. I don't know if they called my home number after. I did get paid for one day's work. Story 80. Wasn't told I'd be on the operations floor on my first day. Didn't bring my personal protective equipment. Got handed company-issue steel toe boots. Cheap and nasty, which promptly began to tear my feet to shreds. I show my supervisor my bleeding feet and tell him I can be back in an hour with my own boots and could then finish my shift. He told me if I leave to get them, don't bother coming back. Easiest walkout ever. Story 81. Showed up for a job that advertised itself as a sales job, and it turned out to be a telemarketing gig. I immediately had my hackles up at this, but needed money so very bad that I didn't walk out immediately. Shortly after starting the shift, I realized that it was telemarketing for what seemed like a sham charity trying to get donations to something that was grifting 90% of the money. I still need the job, but this is even worse than I initially thought. A couple hours into the shift, the auto dialer dialed a family friend and per the job was required to read a script to try and swindle someone that I knew for money. I hung up on the call and walked out never to return. I don't even think I got paid the $20 or whatever I was owed at that point. Story 82. Not sure if this counts, but was out of work and had a young family. Walked into local Walmart, asked to drop off resume. Was told we don't take resume, you have to attend an info session first, sign up in the book over there. Open up the book. At the top of the page was information about the session, time, date, etc. And in all caps font size huge, says starting time is 6:30 sharp. Anyone even 1 second late will not be allowed in, and like 17 exclamation marks. I was like, I don't even work here, and you are yelling at me. Closed the book and walked out. Story 83. I got recruited for my work designing booths for game conventions. A dream job with full benefits and a gold salary. They wanted me to design booths to help people find financial independence. So what exactly is your product? We just want you to tailor it to the people who live there and the store where we set up. Yes, but what do? We sign people up for credit cards. Cool, then I'll need rates, terms, stuff we can advertise. We don't like to advertise that since it's so high at first. Well, what can I put on the front? Well, they'll have a high rate at first, but every other person they get to put money on the card reduces their rates. It was a pyramid scheme. They wanted me to make booths for a credit card pyramid scheme. Story 84. Lasted a week at a glasses shop, eye clinic. Hated it immediately, but stuck out the training because I really needed the job. Mostly spent my time watching unclear videos about eyes and their accessories and talking to my coworkers who were a little too into the job for what it was. The straw that broke the camel's back was they had me sit in all the machines for training to get a sense of what our tech can do. And it didn't occur to me that I'd never seen anybody clean these things. So yeah, immediately got an infection in my eye that really looked attractive. Didn't even quit with dignity. I sent them an email. I got my next job not even a week later, and it was thankfully a much, much better fit. Story 85. I joined a small practice with 2 lawyers as a front desk receptionist. I was warned ahead of time one of the attorneys was extremely mean. He walked in, I smiled and said good morning as he walked by. He turned around, got in my face, and said, "Don't ever smile at me again. I see right through that." I went into the bathroom and called my parents, and they said, "Quit that job right now and never go back." I didn't even have the guts to tell them. I left and emailed the other, nicer attorney, and he said, "I don't blame you. Everyone quits because of him." Story 86. First day at a mediocre chain, I saw one of the cooks put his hand directly into the guacamole. Not gloved, not freshly washed. Just straight up, grabbed a handful and plopped it on a plate. I had been in charge of food safety at my previous job, so I turned and walked into the manager's office to alert him. He said it wasn't a big deal, so I handed him my company, issued apron, and quit. I had just been sat my first 2 tables, apparently, and was called unprofessional as I walked out. I drove over to the other chain I'd originally worked for several years before. Different location. Walked in, applied, started working a few days later, no longer in food service. Instead, I'm a lawyer who does employment law, 100% inspired by my time in food service. Story 87. Dishwasher at Chili's. First day, back there by myself. Thought I was doing a decent job at keeping up. Everything is almost done and the cooks bring me the last of their cookware. 2 seconds later, manager Dave comes back and blows a gasket saying I need to be done before the cooks are done. Just let Dave know he could finish them himself. Maybe I was supposed to go grab the cooks' dishes. I don't know. Was there by myself on my first day. No breaks. Didn't get to eat my free meal. Story 88. I worked for the company that makes the seasonings and side dishes for Popeye's Chicken.it. Seemed like an easy summer job, so I took it. The first night I was there, the humidity was around 100%. I was hot and sweaty and covered in seasoning. I was wondering about my life choices at 18 at that point. The exit point was when they asked me to get inside this giant biscuit batter sifting machine and beat it with a large hammer to break the mix free. I asked the manager if they were going to turn it off first, and he said that they didn't have the time to do that. So I asked him if I could run to my car and get a dry shirt. I wonder if he's still waiting for me to come back. Story 89. Owner of the company was the guy I reported to. In a room full of people, sales meeting, he yelled at his son, who was also at my rank and pay, and said, "I'm talking, be quiet," when the son tried to calmly clarify his side of the issue they were having. I told the boss on a call later that day that I would never allow for someone to speak to me that way, especially in front of others, and that since this was his practice, never mind that it was his own kid he was steamrolling, I would look for employment elsewhere. He was flabbergasted and tried to apologize, but I'd paid the price in the past putting up with temperamental, volatile types, and I just wouldn't or won't abide it anymore. Story 90. The manager that hired me was telling me how desperate they are for good people. The 3 other store managers all had interviews lined up. Everyone I met complained about the job. Then they taught me to use the register and kind of just left me there the entire day, waiting on me to tell someone I needed help rather than having someone there to help me. Then when I didn't show up for the next day, the manager texted me for days after messaging me like I dumped him. I thought things were going good. Please, how can we work something out? It's incredibly unprofessional to quit without a 2 weeks notice. Dude, I wasn't trained. You don't need 2 weeks. Story 91. Desk job, all male staff. Male boss made a joke that I can feel free to use the kitchen to make food for everyone because finally we have a woman on the team. Walked out. Story 92. I found an ad in the paper for a nonprofit organization that was looking for paid workers and claimed a good pay rate. Got to the interview, and it was their orientation and the first evening of work. They took us out for a door-to-door adventure trying to get donations for their organization. Pay was based on commission depending on how much you collected. The catch was that you wouldn't get paid for the first day of work. They were shocked when none of us wanted to try to do the job for free and we just wanted to leave. Story 93. My buddy got me an IT job at JCPenney corporate back in the day. This was back when everyone had 21 monitors. You literally logged into the request queue and 99% of it was move my monitor from one side of my desk to the other. Another was clean my mouse balls. I worked there one day, hid in the bathroom half of that day. We weren't buddies after that. Source, I'm old. Story 94. I got hired at a floral shop, and on my very first day, they let me know that instead of being full-time, my position is actually just seasonal, and the season ended in 2 weeks. They were a family-owned business, and unfortunately for the business itself, the manager, the owner's niece, let it slip very casually that they don't have room for anybody at the shop anyways. And so I pretty much realized that I would only have a job for like 2 weeks, and then I'd be done, and I didn't want to waste my time anymore, so I went on my lunch break and I just didn't come back. Thanks for wasting my time, I guess. Story 95. Car dealership. Got a position in the parts department. Knew the dealership's GM from playing hockey with him a long time ago. The parts manager who was doing the hiring seemed like an okay guy in the interview, orientation, but he kept telling me how much he thought I was going to hate him because everyone hated him there. Also knew one of the service advisors, so I asked him what the guy's deal was, like, why was he being so negative like that? He told me he's always like that and just has a crafty personality. Had gotten into it with techs on many occasions. Decided I didn't need a boss like that and walked out on my third day. Story 96. I applied for a job at a car wash as a cashier when I was in college. This was back in like 2013. I interviewed and was hired for the position, but when I started, they actually put me on detailing. I did it for a day and then never showed back up. It just didn't sit right with me. The cashier position paid around $14 per hour. The car washer, detailer was like $8 or $9 per hour plus tips. But as always, tips are never guaranteed. I was pissed, so I just never showed back up. Story 97. The job was misrepresented. I showed up on my first day and they said, "We're decided that you should do this job instead of what we hired you for." I said no and walked out. An interesting outcome. A few weeks later, I received a day's paycheck from them, considering I'd only been there less than an hour. Story 98. When I was, at 18, put as an assistant in the 3-year-old room with one other day care worker. There were over 30 kids in the room, and I was told that we weren't allowed to tell the parents if one of the kids had misbehaved or had a bad day. Never went back. Story 99. It was my first job right out of high school at a Pizza Hut. It was disgusting inside, and the few pizzas they let me make, they didn't care about the quality or mention any sanitary process. Just how much of each ingredient used. I got a call from Walmart the next morning and just never showed back up to that Pizza Hut. Story 100. Only one time, it was the actual work. It was way too physical for me. I just didn't see myself exhausting myself daily, and the other time was a manager. The hiring manager was cool, but the shift manager was an idiot, so I left same day. Story 101. It was a data temp job. They sat me at a desk for 4 hours. No one trained me or told me what to do. I asked if you could go off-site for lunch. They said yes, and I never came back. They didn't even call me after. Story 102. In the 2000s, my first job was at Abercrombie & Fitch. I walked out after I overheard a manager say about me, "She looks exotic, let's keep her in the front, but she needs jeans that show off her butt." I didn't realize how problematic they really were until I got older. Glad I dodged all that. Story 103. It made me remember my first ever professional job at a small polygraphy, where you just had to do PIN, credit card designs, print, and laminate it all. Came in 10 minutes earlier, met with the owner. He showed me around and my spot and said, "You're 3 minutes late for your job that will cost you 30% of your today's salary." I took the documents he gave me to sign, ripped them in two, and just walked out. Story 104. Worked a Wendy's for a day, ended up puking in the back room call-in sick the next day because I'm not about to be flipping burgers and puking at the same time, which I believe is rather reasonable. Manager screams at me over the phone off, never went back. But I was smart enough to clock out before leaving after getting sick, so I still got paid. That Wendy's location cannot keep employees. Story 105. Quit in the first 30 minutes? Saw the director tearing a factory floor worker a new one. Called the boss over, asked him if he had an office, then laid into him and demanded to know why he didn't use it. Then told him where to stick his job. As I was leaving, a couple of the guys had big grins on their faces, and an office girl said, "Thank you" to me. I heard a few months later that the guy changed his tune when dealing with his staff and had become more accommodating towards them. Story 106. Not quite the first day, but we had a disagreement over what constituted paid work. She was insisting I should be on call throughout the day on my personal phone taking customer phone calls, and that did not count as work I get paid for. I told her to find someone else then. Story 107. When in college, I took a summer job for a fencing company. The first day I realized that I would be teaching the guy who had just started his company how to build fences. I left at the end of the day and didn't even bother to claim my wages. I just started my own fencing gazebo company. I grew it to 10 employees by the end of the summer. I went back to college and paid my way while running this business on the side. Story 108 was a budget steakhouse, Buffett-style place back in the day. Was supposed to be a cook, previously worked the grill at a Dairy Queen. Left the office, grabbed an apron and headed to the kitchen. Was the dirtiest place I've ever seen in my life. Turned around, walked right back out. Damn that. I was 16, 18 years old, somewhere in there, but had a good work ethic and sure in myself. I think I went to AutoZone after that and then worked there through college with only a few issues. Story 109. When I was younger, I was hired at a retail place right before the holidays. During the interview, they told me that I would work for a couple hours on either Christmas Eve or Christmas, but not both. When I got my schedule, they had me down for a full shift on Christmas Eve and Christmas. The job was also much different than I envisioned, but my main motivation for walking out was being lied to right off the bat. Story 110. Worked at Sonic in high school. I saw a cockroach riding a rat like a tiny cowboy. I walked out. I can still remember the smell of the ice cream machine, moldy and spoiled ice cream all over. Damn Sonic. Story 111. I did that one time. I went to work as a temp on an assembly line for manufacturing engine parts for a well-known brand of boats. We were not allowed to use stools, and if someone had to go to the bathroom, the entire assembly line got shut down and waited for their return. I told the supervisor that I wouldn't be returning the next day. She thanked me for finishing out my shift and told me many people never did. Story 112. The commute plus having to get up at the ass crack of dawn to commute in for a 9-5. Hour and a half going in, and 2.5 hours going home with no accidents either way. Story 113. Big name department store. First day was at the beginning of the back-to-school sale. Almost no training before throwing me out alone onto the sales floor to run registers and left with no coworker to help with any of my questions. When a coworker did appear, it was to tell me I was to go to work in a different area. Everything seemed unorganized in a management sense, and I wasn't sticking around. Never went back after that first day. Story 114. Didn't quit, but knew I was done right away. Held, though, to find another job, but it was the time clock in an accounting office environment, while common in the warehouse or other places, clocking in or out is not normal in accounting. I had to clock out even for a washroom break. I was so shocked by it, I literally asked other employers in interviews if they had this system. Not that I'd want to goof off, but it was very questionable from a pay standpoint. Story 115. I misread the title. This happened gradually. When I was the only person that was competent enough to handle the new high-end product, was sent out to fix them when the other workers installed them incorrectly, and was never given a pay raise for it. Story 116. Had issues with the manager giving me the wrong forms, sending me to wrong place for training, telling me the wrong start time on my first day, and scheduling me for days. I told them I couldn't work due to my other job. The final straw was when I had to use the bathroom, and the guys told me to make sure to bring my phone because they didn't have a light in there. I walked out right after that, said I wasn't coming back. Story 117. Got a job doing tele fundraising for mothers against drunk driving. First call, get an older gentleman, talk to him. He wants to set up a recurring monthly donation for like $20 or something. Finish call, supervisor tells me I should push for more money and for it to be a credit card payment because then we get it immediately, so the third-party company I worked for would get their cut faster. I walked out immediately after. Story 118. I had a massive seizure because of the computer screen flashing when a call was incoming. I could have worked through it in theory. Most of the time, my seizures don't affect my ability to speak clearly, and the caller isn't going to know I'm seizing or fell out of my wheelchair over the phone. However, the blinding headaches, pain from falling, and bruising from seizing wasn't worth the hourly rate to me. Story 119. Hired as a cook. Stated I had to leave by 5 that first day appointment. It was agreed upon. This is before cell phones. Head cook unplugs clock at 4:40. When I find out the real time, 5:10, he says, "What do you have to do that's so important? See ya. So many holes. Just so many." Story 120. It was a job where I had to pull people that were walking by the mall and sell them fake brand perfumes at the most expensive price. That same day, I sold a $5 perfume to some guys at $75 just because I was flirty with them. All those kiosks y'all see by the mall are drop shipping products, don't get scammed. But yeah, I quit the same day BC. I didn't like the manager. Story 121. I started a job as a forklift driver. Turns out it was a laboring job with a forklift license needed for some parts of it. I've no issues doing manual labor, but the actual job was nowhere near the description in the ad, and the place was rough as guts. I gave it 45 minutes and told them it's not for me and walked out. Story 122. First shift at a nightclub. Wasn't trained, but was immediately put on tills for one of the busiest nights of the week. Got pulled over for a disciplinary from the supervisor for not following instructions that were never given to me. No, straight out. Story 123. I was hired to do pressure washing and some serving, bussing at a sushi fusion place in a downtown bar hopping area. The place was disgusting and the new manager was a damn lunatic. I quit after like my third or fourth day and immediately called the health department on them. They had the largest roaches I've ever seen, maggots in their trash cans outside storage areas, multiple different species of fruit flies, etc. Story 124. I was a server. They assigned me my section. It was an addition they built upstairs. It was up 88 stairs. Those stores were on the opposite side of the building from the kitchen, and the building was huge. I told them it wasn't going to work. I'm not trying to run a marathon for every food order. Story 125. I was hired as a cook at Panda Express. Did all the paperwork. Before I even clocked in on day one, they told me I had to be the cashier because only guys are supposed to cook. ITA. This was during my college years, so around 2008. At the time, I didn't think to question what's legal and what's not. Story 126. When it came to sign the payroll stuff, I noticed that the hourly amount was less than what we agreed on and questioned it. They said, no, that's what you agreed to at the interview. After some back and forth, I said, well, if you're going to mess with my pay on my first day, I don't think this isn't going to work for me. Thanked them for their time and left. Story 127. I was working at Panera, and I got yelled at for not knowing the tables were supposed to be in a specific color order. I think it was blue before yellow. I was literally yelled at on my first day. Just a couple of hours in, I walked out right then and there. Story 128. 6 days per week job starting at around 6 a.m., clock out at 8 p.m. or so. Minimum hourly pay. At the time I was wanting to become a cook at Asian cuisine. I would have done it, but then I was accepted to college. Story 129. Call center did a bait and switch. We'd already started working when they announced that for the next 5 weeks we wouldn't be paid as we were training. There was nothing said about this in the posting, interview, or contract. I and a bunch of others immediately walked out. Story 130. Joined a company as an admin for a water cooler company. It was on the top floor of a porta-cabin, up a clanky ladder. We had to sit in silence and work. Not even a radio. Freezing cold. A couple of weeks later, I found I was pregnant, so I'm glad I wasn't wobbling up those steps for the following 9 months. Story 131. I was too short for the counters at a pizza place, and kneading the dough all day killed my shoulders. Also, the only 2 deliveries I did that day were to homes in expensive areas, and neither of them tipped. Story 132. I worked for a large company in my state that was pretty awful. One day a new girl started, and I think she lasted about a week. She called in saying the wheels fell off her car, and she couldn't come in. I respected her so much for not spending a second longer in that crap hole. Story 133. We spent the first 4 hours of the day, about 8 new hires, going over the I-9. We weren't done at lunch from all the questions. I didn't go back after lunch. Got a call 2 weeks later asking why I didn't show for my shift. I was like, I walked out of orientation, my man. Story 134. I was given 0 precursor training and expected to make up sandwiches for a cafe with 0 health and hygiene regulations. Knives stored on high shelves right above my workspace, my head. Told once ingredients for like 10 diff sandwiches and left on my own to get it done, not having had a tour or nothing. Story 135. I shadowed a premium meat salesman for the day. The day consisted of trying to be allowed into gated communities to peddle high-end meat subscriptions to the residents. Then I was told I needed to lease my own refrigerated meat truck, and I was done. The sales guy was nice, though. Bought me Panda Express. Story 136. It was a crap waiting job when I first moved to a new city, and the manager of the restaurant started criticizing me immediately in the third person, speaking on behalf of the chef, owner that wasn't there in the first 5 minutes. Turned right around and left. Story 137. I quit a job on the first day because I was promised a computer with a big screen. I have terrible eyesight and disclosed this at the interview. I showed up to a tiny monitor and 8 font on a spreadsheet I'd be working on daily. I go out of there. Story 138. I had a friend that took a job at a gas station in Minneapolis. He was told to throw out all the old hot sandwiches. He wanted to give them to the homeless people in the area, but was told they had to go in the trash. He was so disgusted he quit after the first day.